What is up, everyone? It's David. Welcome back to Gem Mint MTG. Got a fun video for you today. We just had the PWCC auctions in the last couple days, and I wanted to go ahead and review the selling prices of some of the top selling cards ever in the history of Magic the Gathering. That's right, we had a PSA 10 Alpha Black Lotus come up for sale. That is pretty much the holy grail of Magic the Gathering cards, especially graded Magic the Gathering cards. It doesn't get bigger than the Alpha Black Lotus, and a PSA 10 is pretty much top of the line for that card, for any card. So let's get right into it. Alpha Black Lotus previously sold for $511,000. I covered it on this channel about a year ago. Since then, we've had a lot of stuff happen in the world of Magic the Gathering. You had kind of like the bubble burst of the 2021. You had Magic 30th. You've had players, kind of revolting and all that stuff. So there's been a lot of turmoil in the last year since that previous record-setting sale. So the question on everybody's mind was, is this card going to sell for more or is it going to sell for less? Because this is like the ultimate bellwether of vintage Magic the Gathering. And happy to report that no, this card did not sell for less. This card sold for about $30,000 more at a record-setting $540,000 for the PSA 10 Alpha Black Lotus. So yeah, the last one sold for about $511,000. That made it about a $30,000 gain over the course of the year, though, which is, I don't know, what is that, 6% or something like that. Something like that, 6-7%. But I think that's fantastic news for anybody who's into, like the really high-end vintage Magic the Gathering, particularly graded cards. It's a good thing to see. I'm glad that it's sold for more. I honestly wasn't sure about this one. It's a really tough time, in the economy. Like, that's a huge factor in this, is that if you're somebody with $540,000 to spend on a piece of cardboard, then you have to be probably apt enough to know what your opportunity cost is. Putting that money somewhere else in the market, you could be very securely earning 6% or more on that money, parking it in a completely risk-free account. So it's nice to see that someone that affluent thought that they would still put their money into a Magic the Gathering card. I think that's a great thing. There were also other cards that were sold. My Alpha Mox Ruby sold for $39,600. Alpha Mox Pearl sold for $34,800. So about $35,000 for the Mox Pearl, about $40,000 for the Mox Ruby, both in PSA 10 condition. And then this one I felt like, of all the Magic cards that were sold, I felt like this one was the best, quote unquote deal. But this was an Alpha Ancestral Recall that sold for $37,200. Now, maybe I'm just biased because I just love blue cards, but I consider Alpha Ancestral Recall way above any Alpha Mox. Maybe not the Sapphire. I'd say they're about on par. But Alpha Mox Ruby PSA 10 sold for thousands of dollars more than an Alpha Ancestral Recall. That I thought was very interesting. I've always felt like Ancestral Recall is the most underrated, underappreciated part of the Power 9. I feel like it should be worth way more than any Mox. I feel like it should be on par with Black Lotus just because it's the strongest card. And in my opinion, it's the strongest card in the game ever printed. It's 1 mana for 3 cards all the time. There's no conditions, no nothing. And the idea that this would sell for less than a Mox Ruby is kind of crazy to me. Another cool thing that I wanted to touch on in this video regarding the Alpha Black Lotus is that there was also an 8.5 Alpha Black Lotus that sold, and that card sold for $108,000. So if you kind of look at the PSA 10 and the Beckett 8.5, you kind of see the type of multiples that you normally see on a PSA 10. If you do the math, it's about 5x, which is very strong, but once again, those types of multiples really come, in my opinion, into play on very special cards, Arabian cards, alpha cards, stuff that's very, very exclusive. I think is the kind of stuff that's going to command that really, really, really strong premium. Because if you're just in the market for an Alpha Black Lotus and you can get an 8.5 for 108,000, spending over 5 times that on the PSA 10 is just that is big, big, big money. And I think that if I recall right, the last time that this card sold, I used that sale as kind of evidence to show what kind of multiples PSA 10s generally sell for. And in that video at the time, the Alpha Black Lotus was worth about 100,000 or so. So you can kind of see that same relationship of raw, not necessarily raw. In this case, it's a graded card, but it's a graded 8.5, which is pretty much like a near mint card. Generally, you don't get like a premium for cards in 8.5 condition. Depending on the card, you might get some kind of premium. You might get the cost of grading back, but you're not going to get like a really strong premium for an 8.5 in any case. But it's a good indication of what a truly near mint version of that card sells for. And so if you assume that the Alpha Black Lotus in near mint condition from Alpha, which is kind of impossible to find. Like, it's not something that's regularly available on the open market. So using graded copies is kind of, in my opinion, a good way to see if you did have a truly near mint, high resolution scan photograph of Black Lotus for sale on the open market. I think you'd probably be selling it for around $100,000 to $125,000. So just once again, more kind of evidence that there is a relationship to the cost of these cards. So overall, I think this is great for the hobby. I think it's good for everybody who's into these like really high-end vintage cards. I don't have any Alpha Black Lotuses, not even close, but I do have some high-end vintage graded cards that really mean a lot to me. And it's great to see that they're still being appreciated even in the time of Magic 30, as well as, the complete downturn in the economy, because a lot of times, the really premium stuff can take a hit. And from everything that I've seen, graded Magic the Gathering, particularly high-end reserve list cards, have been pretty much immune to a lot of that negative pressure that we've seen around the hobby. So that's all I got for you today. I am getting over really bad sickness. I had COVID for the last week, so my voice is kind of harsh. I've been like coughing like crazy. I've got tons of nasty fluid and stuff, but still wanted to hop on and do a vid for this week. I got more in the hopper coming. I'm going to do a full review of the graded marketplace. I've been working on the data for that. And more good news on that front. There's a lot of cards selling, a lot of really, really great prices, good deals to be had as well. So stay tuned for more of that coming soon. All right, take it easy. I'll see you all around.